And these were the last words I ever heard my father say to me. Time has elasticity to it. And within that, the way I spend my time is giving an indication as to what is important to me. If I make a claim that I don't have the time to do something, what I'm really saying is that it's not important to me. And however I'm choosing to use my time at that moment is really what it is that I value so much, that this thing that I have that is diminishing the more I live, I can't use or gain any more of it other in the ways that I'm using it in the moment. That's showing me what's my importance. And so if I say I don't have the time for something, what I'm really saying is it's not important to me. For me, for example, the work that I do and many others do qualitatively gets defined as being quote unquote good work. May Allah accept it from us and make us people of sincerity. And so within that, especially early in my career, I wasn't in a place where I was necessarily spending so much time with my family, my parents, especially before I got married. I was traveling a lot. There was always work to do. On occasion, I would stop at the home I grew up in New Jersey, perhaps on my way returning from some travels back to New York City, a meal here and there. Weeks would pass. But everyone was able to affirm that this is something that was excusable because there was quote unquote good work that was transpiring. Some years ago, I was blessed to go to a conference in Canada with my mother and my father and myself, just the three of us. We spent a week in Toronto, and as I was speaking at this conference, in the front row, my father and mother were always sitting right there, listening to every session I was in. We had breakfast together, we had lunch together, we had dinner together, we spent time together every moment that we were awake. It was honestly one of the best weeks of my life. When we landed back in New Jersey, where I grew up, my mother and father were returning back to their home in New Jersey, and my brother was picking them up from the airport, and I was returning back to New York City, where I live. My father, before we parted ways, walked over to me, hugged me, kissed me on my forehead, told me he was proud of me and what it is that I'm doing with my life, and said that he had one of the best weeks of his life in that time we spent together. And then he told me that he loved me. And these were the last words I ever heard my father say to me. A week later, I was in Florida, invited to speak at a Mawlid event. And that morning when I landed in Florida, some people picked me up from the airport, took me to have breakfast at a restaurant. I went to freshen up in a restroom. When I came out of the restroom, I found my phone with 30 missed calls on it. I picked up the next one, and it was my sister, and she said they found our father in the parking lot of his office space, and he had had a severe stroke. I excused myself from the gathering, went back to the airport, took the next flight to New York City, landed at JFK. A friend of mine picked me up, drove me to LaGuardia Airport where I had a car parked. I then drove all the way to central New Jersey where I grew up, came to the hospital. 7 hours had transpired between the time I heard from my sister in Florida till when I walked into the hospital doors. The hallway in the ER was filled with my family members, relatives, friends that we grew up with, my wife, my children, my siblings. My mother was there. I walked into that hospital and I didn't leave for 3 months. Where did the time come from? And how was it something that wasn't there before? If you say something is not important to you, or you say rather you don't have the time to do something, what you're really saying is not important to me. And what it then concludes with is an absence of accessibility. that justifications come to cutting off the amount of contact, the time spent with loved ones, people who you want to be in their presence, and you allow for them to be in your presence in a way that there's not separation, that just doesn't fundamentally make sense. And you don't want to be in a place where you have to learn about something like this experientially the way that I did. It was a gift, alhamdulillah, that I could spend that time with my father. 8 years later now, his stroke has still left him paralyzed on the right side of his body and without the ability to speak. But those last words that I heard from him were things that I will treasure and cherish forever. And the ability to do that requires me to understand that I don't want to be like the man who was just adding to the stack of wood that I couldn't already hold, and not able to honor the rights of people who have rights over me, because the only time and place that they could interact with me was when I was sitting on a stage and they were sitting in an audience. Allah brings people into our lives, and our mode of leadership has to be one that is prophetic in its basis, one that understands that the utility of time and accessibility as a priority that enables us to structure our routines in such a way that we understand that time management is essentially self-management. And barakah comes through engaging in consistent actions, as small as they might be, but with sincerity, deep intention, real love, and commitment.